I think this is going to set the record for how many times I've used the word wow in this podcast. I'm sitting here with my jaw on the floor.
The B-52 would launch some missiles up in Alaska, and we would intercept them and actually get to fly formation with a cruise missile.
You decided to push the performance art of flying even further.
At the time, Canada didn't have their own design criteria publicly.
Which is an insane thing to think of now.
No matter how much training you get, you can never simulate the emotions you feel when it's happening for real.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Open Skies podcast. I am your host, Chris Glass. We are here with season 2. That's right, our second year into the podcast. And I am with Captain David Deere, who's a standards pilot at WestJet. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So tell me a bit about your role.
Well, my role at WestJet, I'm a flight technical pilot, and my primary role with the company now is working with NAV Canada and looking with airspace, and working with the company for fuel efficiencies and management.
And that's where we actually got to meet each other, was sitting on the Fuel Council trying to find ways to lower our greenhouse gas emissions and our fuel output all together.
Indeed, yes.
And if you remember, we had that war room set up with all these graphs and charts, and we were tracking all these different initiatives. And
yeah, I kind of miss those days, Chris, because back then we had a whole team of 20 people. Now we're kind of working on doing the same thing with about 4 or 5.
Well, and that was the tragedy of COVID, is I think for not just airlines, but for everything, it kind of stopped a lot of really good work that was doing.
Yes, but we're getting back on track now, and we've got some great initiatives going forward, and very much similar to what we had before, but we're really finding the data gathering. So,
what I wanted to bring you on the podcast, though, you have a very interesting story. You have a very interesting background. At least I found it fascinating. So, how did you get into aviation? What was your start?
My start was my father and both my brothers were pilots.
Oh, and, so family affair.
Way back when, and so both dad and my eldest brother ended up with Air Canada, and I basically wanted to do something exciting. Initially, I didn't want to be a pilot, and then all of a sudden they went into it. My brother joined the Air Force, so I said, "Hey, that looks pretty good," and so I went ahead, joined the Air Force. Fortunately enough, passed the aircrew selection and became a pilot. In the Air Force. Had a wonderful 17 years in the Canadian Air Force and flying some great things. And that's how I sort of started. And then shortly after that, it was a nice time to leave based on what was going on with the Air Force at the time and the government. So I joined the airlines at that point.
Now, what type of aircraft did you fly for the Air Force?
Well, I started off doing 4 years of military college, and then I came out and ended up flying F-18s. F-5s, and ended up on the Snowbirds. So a 5-year tour of duty on the F-18s, and that was wonderful. We stood up the squadron in Cold Lake, a 441 squadron, and it was wonderful. We started with 12 brand new jets right out of the factory and started up in a NORAD role. Looking at sort of air defense of the north. Much of our role was flying out of Comox. We did a full QRA alert area in Comox, and so we would man that 24/7 and operate out of Cold Lake, working on air defense training, etc. So it was a great thing. We did some of the exciting adventures and missions were working with cruise missiles from the north. A B-52 would launch some missiles up in Alaska, and we would intercept them and actually get to fly formation with a cruise missile, which of course is, when it's going nap of the earth like this, it's and trying to find it first of all on the radar, and then once you find it, you're following it and flying formation with it. Just wonderful experiences. And then so that was with the F-18s out of 441, and at the time, of course, 91 came when Iraq was invaded in 90. And I was attack posted at 416 and ended up joining the Desert Cats for some missions in the Gulf War.
Wow. So I'm gonna pick on that a little bit. That seems like a podcast in itself. But what was it like in the 90s in the first Gulf War?
Well, as I've always say this, no matter how much training you get, you can never simulate the emotions you feel when it's happening for real.
Right.
We have spectacular training within the Canadian Air Force, and when you go out and it felt very comfortable doing what we were doing because we were so well trained, and you work as a fabulous team. We had a great squadron commander, Don Matthews, and And through the great leadership and coordination, we ended up being based in Doha and working initially doing combat air patrol missions. So basically doing circular patterns, protecting high value assets over the Persian Gulf. And then as the war progressed relatively quickly, we started moving that combat air patrol farther over the Kuwait and Iraq, and until we were basically right over the Iraqi airfields.
Wow.
And then we transitioned from there into sort of a bit more of an offensive role with sweep escort missions, and that was sort of, we were escorting the British and American bombers, and they would do their bombing. We would escort them with top cover. And then towards the end, we actually ended up doing ground attack missions where we were dropping some bombs. So it was just all inclusive. And that's part of why Canada was so successful out there, because we're so well trained in all the roles that the F-18 is capable.
Tell me about the plane. Like, what's the capabilities of this thing? Like, I see Top Gun, I see all the movies, but what's it like actually flying one of these?
Flying them it's fabulous, and what we ended up having to do, sort of the takeoff and landing has to be second nature. The roll is in between the takeoff and landing, and you've got to learn how to fly the formation, do the weapons. It's a great weapons platform, so you're managing the systems, the weapon systems. You are talking on the radio. You're working very closely. You rarely, if ever, go up as a single chip. You're always with the 2 or 4. Right. So you're working as elements and sections up there, and you constant coordination between you. Flying the actual aircraft itself, you just become so used to every button and switch. There's a hands-on throttle and stick, so you've got lots of buttons as you're manipulating the aircraft itself. You never really have to take your hands off the throttle or stick, and that's the HOTAS. That's what it's all about. And so you kind of become part of it. We sort of often say we strap it on our back and we just go and do what we need to do. And and it was fabulous. Of course, it goes supersonic if you need it, and just a great maneuvering airplane. Super. I just really, really enjoyed it.
And then you had mentioned that you were with the Snowbirds, which is such a iconic Canadian tradition to see. So how was that experience? That must have been just another feather in the cap there.
Well, it's another one of those things I've always wanted to do. When the first time I ever saw the Snowbirds was while I was at military college, looking up like a second-year student, and I go, wow, that's unbelievable, seeing them fly low-level pass overhead. And it was always a dream that there was, at the time, essentially unreachable. But over time, as you train, you realize, hey, maybe I could achieve that. So after I left the Gulf War, my last mission, I went directly over to train on the F-5. And part of the F-5, that was a basic fighter pilot training course. Then we ended up with the colored bird. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. It's actually on a pedestal in Kamloops, and it's the F-5. Cool. It's a colored bird. It's got a painted maple leaf on the belly.
Yes, I have seen it.
Right.
Yes.
So that's it was in 1992. I ended up doing that air show for that summer. That's what led me into the Snowbirds, because doing the air demonstration was something I really enjoyed, the air show element to it, and so I tried out and was successful in the training. A very very demanding tryout process, a couple of weeks where you go up, you start with gentle formation essentially, then you do a little bit harder and harder, go from 2-plane to a 4-plane, and you're assessed every single mission, not only how you fly but also the attitude you have towards each other, towards working as a team, because the Snowbirds, it's such a huge team effort to do it. You're working with not a lot of people, and so you all have to chip in. And the importance of teamwork is amazing and really important.
You would think like fighting in combat, communication has to be there, teamwork has to be there, but what the Snowbirds are accomplishing on a day-to-day basis, that must just have such incredible communication in order to pull off. Talk about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the communication, we start with the overwing briefing, and we basically, by the time we start doing shows, we know the show, start to finish. You can close eyes and sort of go through it. But every single time we do a an actual show, we do a specific briefing, and if we had made perhaps potentially a small error, a little something that happened in the previous show, then as we're going through each maneuver, we would say, okay, I will tighten up that a little bit closer. I'll watch for that, and we all go through, our own piece of how we fly our particular position, and through each and every maneuver. And yeah, it's about a 45-minute brief, the boss, which is the Snowbird lead, he leads, of course, all of it, and we go through our various calls throughout the briefing, and then we just jump in the jet and off we go, and it's extremely disciplined process, and a lot of fun, demanding, but you can never, sit back and relax. You're kind of you're up close.
How close do you get?
You can. Our team was going 4 feet overlap, so we were to the point where we did this. It's called a double diamond topside. We were actually close up to the point. If it was smooth air, we would close up where my wingman's wing was sort of right like 3 feet away from my face.
Oh, wow.
And it was just so close up tight. It was pretty amazing. Of course, you don't look at the wing. That's the thing that's moving. You look at the full body, and you look at the lead. You look through the aircraft to the lead aircraft, so everyone's flying off the stable platform.
Wow.
And you just do your job. We each have a contract where you don't go, you've got a little box that you stay within your formation, and you just stay there and you fly it. And it's some people say it's smoke and mirrors, and it's not. It's actually hands and feet flying, and being as smooth and aggressive at the same time.
And it seems like it never stops, right? I was on the 6th floor at the at the campus at WestJet, so we had a very good view of the runway, and the Snowbirds would always come in and land, and they were always landing in formation, always taking off in formation.
Absolutely. That's all part of it.
Yeah.
Now we are going back quite a ways, because I was on the team in 94, 95. So, Chris, you're really pulling up some of the memories from me trying to kind of recall this. But it's hard. I still do I'm very fortunate. I have my own sport plane now. I still do get to fly with some formations. So I just dearly love it. And so, I can remember it from that for sure.
Well, that's fantastic. And then you decided, after having a career as a fighter pilot and then a second renaissance as a snowbird, you decided that you needed more excitement, so you got into scheduled air travel.
Yes, but there was something in between.
Okay, let's talk about the in-between.
The in-between was, oddly enough, I got out of the Air Force, and I had a tough time getting an airline job because of the actual environment in the industry at the time.
Yeah.
They weren't hiring a lot of pilots, and so
which is an insane thing to think of now, right?
So what I didn't want to sit stable, so I went off and taught at Mount Royal College. So I went from I went from a Snowbird into a Cessna 172. I got my instructor rating just because I wanted to keep flying, and that was important to learn how the civilian way of life worked. Anyway, from there, very quickly, I was offered a position on the Northern Lights Aerobatic team. So I did one semester with the Mount Royal College, and some ex-snowbirds had put together a formation team of extra 300s. And they were adding one more from a 4-plane to a 5-plane. And so
you were number 5.
And I was number 4 because they so we ended up with a 5-ship, and did about a year and a half of that. And that was probably, of all the flying I've done, Chris, that's probably the most exciting. Even looking at the fighters, because the extra 300 is an unlimited class, plus or minus 10 G-forces. It does tumbles end over end.
Wow.
And we're doing the same sort of formation as the Snowbirds do, but with a propeller. And with that, there was, some of the maneuvers we were doing, we would do what's called a double diamond loop. So if this is lead and I'm number 4 behind, we flip upside down. I've got a propeller on my nose. He's got a tail wheel. And we're literally 4 feet away. And now we are doing an outside loop while the wingmen are right side up.
Right.
Yeah. So, and we're pushing on the backside minus 4G, and we talk about plus 4G, minus 4G. Everything's up there. It was just, it was. You come home and your eyes are almost bleeding from that level of concentration and pushing the negative Gs. But it was just so much fun. It was about a 22-minute show, and we went coast to coast all over North America. It was brilliant. So. And that was while I was waiting to get into the airlines, which I wanted to go airlines, but I couldn't go. But this was a wonderful thing to do in between.
So most people kind of take the downtime to relax. You decided to push the performance art of flying even further.
It was an opportunity I just couldn't turn down. It was, the airplane itself is, again, remarkable. And a great bunch of guys and one girl, and we went out there, and it was fabulous to the point where we'd go, show in Halifax and then fly over to Reno air races and fly low level through the Grand Canyon, things like that. And then towards the end of the season, we ended up actually taking the airplanes all the way over to Asia. We flew them to Hong Kong on a 747, take the wings off, transport them to Hong Kong, over to Macau, and then flew over both in China and Thailand on two separate occasions.
Wow.
So for a North American team, a Canadian team, to go over and do air shows in China and Thailand was pretty unusual at the time. Yeah. I think it probably is even now.
I think this is going to set the record for how many times I've used the word wow in this podcast. I'm sitting here with my jaw on the floor. I've known you for a long time, and this is just a side that we've never really
I don't talk about it much because it's I've got some great pictures from the past, but yeah, it was just really quite unique. And the one thing I'll share with the the China shows. In China, the government runs all of their flight plans, and you can't do it. Yeah. And they would not let us do any practice at all. And so it had been quite a time to put the wings together and fly over. So we needed some practice. So we were flying from where we put the airplanes together to the place where we were doing the show, which was about a 45-minute distance, and in between, while we're traveling along, supposedly going straight and level, we were doing all of our maneuvers all the way, loops, rolls, and continue another 10 miles, and then do another loop roll, doing the maneuvers, doing what we could practice. So it was quite unusual to be doing that, but what an opportunity. And you show up the air shows in China, you've got 500,000 people filling the stands. The apron of the big airports, and quite a neat opportunity. I feel very fortunate to have done that.
Wow. Okay, so that's enough of a career all by itself, right? Like if you take that and you say this is what I did as a pilot, that's a full career right there. And then you started your career in commercial air travel. How did that journey start? You went from teaching straight to the airlines, or?
Yeah. Basically, as soon as I got offered an opportunity, both with Air Canada and with Canadian Regional, and I really wanted to be based out west. So, it's a longer story, but bottom line is I decided to stay out west and go on to Canadian Regional until I had enough hours to get on with WestJet. As WestJet at the time was needing 5,000 hours. Yeah. And so I, coming out of the military, even with that, additional flying in the air shows, I was still only about 3,600 hours. So, I ended up doing Canadian Regional for a bit until I got 5,000 hours and jumped on the F-28. The Fokker F-28 was a great transition from a single seat, unit to a dual crew. It was nice to sort of have that transition because it's kind of, the F-28's about 56 people, I think, and great speed breaks and lots of fun. So, and then an ex-Air Force guy working for WestJet was able to recommend me, and I got in 2000, and I've been there ever since. I'm really enjoying it. It's a fabulous company to work for.
So that puts you at 25 years?
Yes, just coming up to 25 years now.
That is an incredible journey on its own. Is it transferable? Like, is the fighter pilot skills transferable to the 737 cockpit, or is it kind of like learning how to ride a different bike all over again?
Without going into a lengthy diatribe about it. I'd say absolutely it's transferable, mainly because of the standard operating procedures, your SOPs. No matter what you're flying, you have specific procedures that you must adhere to. And so whether you're flying a single seat, single plane, or a dual crew, you have specific SOPs. And when we talk about communication, a lot of folks, perhaps back in the early days, there would be some challenges from, say, the earlier jets going over and not being able to work as a crew. But when the later, more advanced tactics that we were using, it required an awful lot of communication between elements. So between your lead and your wingman, right? So contact, I go high, I go low, back and forth. And so you have this contract and verbiage and phraseology that continues back and forth. Well, that's a very similar, you can take that into the crew concept. Now you're just sitting side by side. Gear up, roger, gear up. Flaps down. There's all of that command and response. It's very similar, but rather than being in two separate aircraft, now you're in a single aircraft. And of course, you follow the standard operating procedures, and they're really, really strict, and they need to be because you're flying with someone different every day. Yeah. And so you need to really know the bottom line of what you need to do specifically to fly these airplanes, the operating procedures. So.
It's funny, we're well into the podcast, and I haven't even got to the topic that I brought you on to talk about. But it's that's a fascinating journey, and it's a good segue into talking about standards and your current role as a standards pilot. Right. And really, how I got to know you was your work on the RNP approaches. So, for those people who aren't pilots, what is an RNP approach, and what work did you have to do to get it accepted?
Chris, I felt so guilty burning all of that fuel, having fun. I had to make up for it by being more fuel efficient with the airlines and helping them. So back in 1996, Alaska Airlines developed an RNP AR program, and that was primarily these aircrafts, the avionics, and with GPS technology, they're able to combine those two and fly specific paths through the sky. And in their case, it was in Juneau, Alaska. Yeah. And so I'll explain more about the approaches later. But they developed this RMP technology with working closely with Boeing and the aircraft. The 737 was a remarkable aircraft to do this. And so they were the beginnings of 1996, and 4 of their technical pilots left the company and started a separate company called Navarus, where they would promote this specific technology. And WestJet was the first, the launch carrier in Canada to embrace this and certify both our aircraft and our aircrew to fly these procedures. So what they are, and you've got arrival paths going into airports, and they tend to be coming from different directions. And we sort of meet at a bedpost, and the bedpost is where they bring all the aircraft in again, to sequence them and separate them. And then you join from an arrival procedure onto an approach procedure. And these approaches, they're seamless. It's connected from what's called a common waypoint, and they can go carve through the sky. They're curved approaches, so they're really accurate both laterally and vertically. So laterally, it's called required navigation performance. There's basically put a boundary where there's monitoring and alerting for the flight crew that what they have to stay within this path, plus or minus, in our case, 0.3 or as low as 0.1 nautical mile. Wow, that's just a feet, and so that's the barrier. That's the point at which if you go outside that, you will get an alerting or an alert for the pilot. But the reality is, the accuracy is that of a wingspan. That's how accurate these aircraft fly these approaches. And the really fun thing is that because your containment is so tight, you can go into mountainous terrain and curve around mountains or buildings or noise-sensitive areas and be able to fly these curved, I call them high-definition paths. And so you can roll out, and the design criteria now is such that you can actually roll out about 300 feet like a curved approach, roll out, and 300 feet is your runway in front of you. So now, so we adapted that. Our first airport was in Kelowna, and so we have and these were tailored approaches specific to the WestJet WestJet aircraft. And then over time, at the time, Canada didn't have their own design criteria publicly. So over time, we, Transport Canada and NAV Canada were able to come up with this public design criteria. At that point, we helped. We worked as a team and helped NAV Canada develop these RMP public procedures right across the country, coast to coast. And so now we have them pretty much at every major airport in Canada. I think there's about 22 of them.
This is going to sound like a criticism of the process, and I don't mean it to be, but with the industry we're in, things move slower, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways, because you want to make sure what we're doing is safe, and with so many moving points and so many people in the sky, you want to make sure things are safe. How long did it take for this adoption to take place?
Oh, it did take quite a while, because when we started our process, there wasn't the regulation. We almost had to regulate by exemption.
Yeah.
And having a specific auditing process where Transport Canada would come in and look very closely at our the way we would develop these things and fly these things and train these procedures. That took quite a. It was a very tailored approach,
right?
Literally and figuratively. And then over time, again, as I was mentioning, Transport Canada came up with the FAA have their design criteria, and our design criteria here is TP 308 to document that specific how to basically design approaches. That was developed, and then NAV Canada sort of took it on, and we worked with them. And when they would do the approaches, we as in the National Airline Council of Canada, which does include Air Canada, WestJet, Air Transat, and Jazz, we would get the opportunity to fly these in the simulator, and that's where a flight technical team would come in there. We'd fly them just to make sure that they didn't, the profile wasn't too high to be able to slow down. The connectivity, the flyability was workable. So that's where our role came in there. So as far as time concerned, it took about probably 5 years to be able to put things in place coast to coast. And I mean, NAV Canada did eventually not eventually, but they put together a great team where they're very very knowledgeable, and they did a great job putting these in place where we needed to. And the other piece I'll add on to that is in Calgary, we one of the first ones to call what's called established on RMP. So with this technology and the curved approaches, we have parallel runways, right?
Yeah.
So if you have parallel runways, let's say that this is the runways here, and you've got two guys. Right now, we're able to do this curved approach together simultaneously and come in. Whereas before, the separation standard required a 1,000-foot separation and 3 miles. So you'd have two aircraft coming, so one would be able to turn in, the other one had to continue going out, had to stay 1,000 feet higher, and 3 mile separation. So the added mileage was huge by having this EOR, and again, Calgary is the first in the world to, the first to really establish the separation standard, and we do it every day. The teams involved, the controllers are spectacular, and so we see 80-85% of our approaches doing these short curved approaches into Calgary, and it saves about 60 to 100 liters per approach. And when you add up all of the airplane or the flights that we fly, it's huge savings.
Can you give me an idea of how big that number would be without giving away any trade secrets or anything like that? Is there like an amount that you could throw out there that we've been able to save?
I think Chris, you can do math. If we're looking at 500 flights a day, and we're getting to do this even 80% of the airplanes. I'm talking Canada. There are U.S. has obviously been able to adopt, and they have lots of RP approaches too. So So it's significant when it comes to the amount of savings, and again, it's 60 to 110 liters is pretty much what we establish as the savings compared to a conventional approach.
Right.
So it's both vertical and lateral. Like, because in the old days, the vertical was you come down level, and every time you level off, not only would you add fuel, you'd add a lot of noise. And so these approaches are continuous idle descents.
Oh, so they're quieter.
They're often called the green approach or the quieter approach, because if it's designed correctly, you can be idle all the way around, and you just configure with the gear and flaps. That'll slow you down all the way as you go down. So they're really efficient approaches.
In my time with WestJet and then my career after WestJet, I've got to see and get exposed to how a lot of airlines do business. And, the reputation of airlines is that we just burn fuel and nobody's looking at the green output and how to save. And it's the exact opposite. I see so many cool initiatives going on within airlines to lower their greenhouse gas input and whatnot. What else can an airline do to limit their greenhouse gas output?
Well, we do have lots of initiatives. As I think the latest one we're working on today, as we speak, is the APU off initiative.
Yeah.
And any time an aircraft lands, you typically, let's call it 40 minutes to an hour turnaround time for it to offload the passengers and then unload and fuel up. During that time on the ground, 80 to 90% of the fuel consumed is through an APU. It's an auxiliary power unit that runs both the
third engine.
Yes, that runs both the power and the air.
Yeah.
And so for those flying, you have these bridge-mounted ground service equipment. So that's a ground power unit that plugs in to provide power, and a PCA or preconditioned air unit. They're like a great big
yellow hose that fits into the bottom of the plane.
Absolutely. So most bridges have those bridge-mounted GCAs, GSCs, sorry. And when they pull up, park, bring the bridge across, they really, the standard is essentially to have the power plugged in at arrival plus 4 minutes, and then the air plugged in to the airplane, into the belly, arrival plus 6 minutes. So that's, with that, we are working very hard on having our crews, turn off the APU 10 minutes after arrival, and then have it off for the duration of the turn, and then 10 minutes prior to departure, turn it back on, because you do need it for the pushback and the start.
Of course.
So that's what we're working on very, very hard. And again, without using specific numbers, hundreds of thousands of hours are burned using an APU on turns. So there's huge opportunities to reduce that. And we're not really doing anything different. We're just sort of trying to put more emphasis in having the flight crews and cabin crews take a little bit more of a proactive management of the temperature in the cabin.
Yeah.
And so that's the big piece of it. And so we've got temperature probes. We've got lots of different opportunities. If you're going into a sun destination, you can close the blinds to keep the direct sunlight from coming in. Yeah. And doing whatever you can to keep the airplane cold, or in the winter, of course, heat it.
Yeah.
And now, so that's the thing. If it's below a certain temperature, you don't want to turn the APU off, because you can actually freeze the pipes and the plumbing in an aircraft. So
you're really looking for that Goldilocks temperature, and there's a couple of months out of the year where it's just the ideal time and to turn those off and get the savings. So that's really cool. Like I love the fact that airlines are looking at many different ways to lower fuels. In one of the previous versions of this podcast, we had an expert of sustainable fuel.
Aviation fuels, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was just really interesting the work that this industry is doing to self-police themselves, especially in North America. Like, we're not forced yet anyway to emission standards like if they are in Europe, the same sort of way. So
but we're
very proactive.
Yeah, we're starting to get that way because we've just finished sort of a bit of a project with Transport Canada on looking at the ways to work on this APU off initiative. And that's pretty important to be able to, as you say, stay ahead of it because it does burn a lot. And there's lots we can do as an industry. We've got Canada's Aviation Action Plan, climate action plan, and that's all part of it. Meaning that we want to get, I believe it's 10% SAF fuels by 2030. Yeah. And of course, we want zero emissions basically in the industry by 2050. So we got to work pretty hard on that to get that. That's a big opportunity to really push hard. And we talked about the APU piece. There's also we encourage single engine taxi. So where appropriate, where it's not slippery on the runway, we're pushing guys to single engine taxi out, and then just before takeoff, start the second engine. Obviously, that would be important, and off we go. So through a concerted effort and encouragement, we're seeing a great improvement in that aspect of our operations. So that's good. We're looking very closely at additional fuel. So for every amount of fuel or weight you carry on the airplane, it's about 3.5% of fuel is burned carrying that weight.
Yeah.
So it's important to, obviously have enough fuel by regulation and by practical sense of where you're going to the destination based on the weather, et cetera. But in instances, we will need to add additional fuel, and so we have to be very careful at how much additional fuel we add. We don't want to just throw on hundreds of thousands of pounds, and burn it and not use it.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't kind of understand that the fuel itself has weight that adds to how much fuel you need to burn. Like, Absolutely. It makes sense when you think about it. But, I remember one of the initiatives we did was we took everything off a 737 and weighed it and to see what the impact of everything that wasn't attached would be for flying. And the numbers were astronomical on how...
It's not something you think about, right? I mean, so you'll sit there in an in-flight magazine, you open it up and it doesn't feel heavy. But imagine 200 in-flight magazines put in one box, try and go lift it.
Right.
That's pretty heavy. So 3.5% of that to carry that weight will be burned.
Yeah.
That may or may not be be. So
we have 1,000 flights a day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It really does make a difference. So I don't want to say nickel and diming it, but we're really, really looking closely at every aspect that we can actually, take off. Why do we need to, if we're going a very short half an hour flight, why do we need a full pot of water type of thing? So we're trying to sort of work really, and I think every airline is doing that. We're really working hard as an industry, and when it comes to this level, the commercial things are kind of put aside. We work very closely together on safety and technical matters. We're great with our airline partners.
Yeah, there's a real team aspect to that part of it. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been
Pleasure.
My honor.
Mine too.
Thank you for joining us on the Open Skies podcast. We'll be back with more of season 2 coming up soon.